Good morning. I'm Sean from Sean's Tech Blog. I'm here with Larry Viziel, seasoned technology expert. We're going to be talking about engineering, tech leadership, technology and product, a couple different other topics. So let's get right into the questions. So, what is there a, I don't want to ask principles, but what do you use for your guide in engineering, leadership, and decision making?
Engineering leadership and decision making. So I'd say that the most important part of leadership is just regarding the teams and making sure that everyone is, technology aside, just from a management perspective. There are a lot of personalities that come on board when you're managing a team of technology folks and developers, and everyone has a different level of social skills and the ability to work well together. Sometimes you have some very brilliant technologists and developers, and they don't quite always have the best social skills and the ability to convey their ideas. So I think that's number one. Beyond technology is managing the people and making sure that everyone can kind of get along and get their ideas expressed and listened to, and that everyone understands that even though they do have great ideas, sometimes not every idea is going to actually be implemented for a whole variety of reasons. But I'd say that's the first, is making sure that you're able to manage the people who are coming to you with their skills, and that you're able to leverage their skills as needed and support their what they need help with. So that's number one part of as far as technology management and just managing a team. And then as far as decision making, when you hear an idea, you do rely a lot on consensus, and that's part of it, is whether the entire team thinks that the idea is actually something you should build and leverage and move forward with, and you want to at least get an idea of what the doubts are and why people wouldn't want to move forward with a piece of with a technology and how they are going to implement it or go in that direction. I have learned often in my career that and in life in general, it's better to say why not than to say why. So just let people have a shot at doing it, and it's better to just let them try it and fail. Anything worth building is worth building wrong. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to veer into engineering and product. So what tools or technologies are more essential in your stack? So open source versus purchasing some new tool, or I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. So the number one thing you want to look for is industry standard. Beyond anything else, right? You want to at least look at the industry standard, right? So if there are 5 tools out there and one of them is the industry standard, give it an evaluation. Typically, though, it sometimes is expensive, right, to go with whatever the gold standard is. But give it a look. Then look at the second option, and then look at the open source stuff too. Sometimes with open source stuff, it's not a matter of reinventing the wheel. It's a matter of reinventing the tank. And what do I mean by that? There was an analogy back in the day of you had Windows users and Mac users and Linux users. And you had Windows users who were out there and they were just driving your typical Ford car, and it got them from point A to point B, got them to work, and everything was great. And then you had your Mac users, and they were driving sort of like the Ferrari, which was really fancy, but it's not something you're going to be taking every day to work. And then there are these crazy people in the woods who were these Unix users, and they were building a tank, and they were giving it away for free. Yes, it was a tank. It was given for free. Why would you be driving a tank to work, right? So you want to look for what you actually need it for and what the use is. We had at one point leveraged a technology for policies, which was XACML policies, which actually is a very smart idea. Like, I think that the XML-based system was brilliant, and I think that the way they kind of did the permissions was very smart. I think it was a good concept. But my company decided to go with open source software as opposed to going with something that was had a robust intuitive front end and the ability to kind of an API that you can connect with and kind of make it very intuitive, as opposed to what we had to do was I had to train a bunch of teams to kind of get to know this esoteric XML. And it was, while it was a very good technology, it wasn't quickly adopted. And I think that sometimes if you're going to go with something that is open source, you have to also take into account that it is not necessarily going to be something that is simple to use and easy to adopt and for all the other teams to kind of get on board with it. Whereas if you go with a product that costs a little bit of money or is the industry standard, you're going to find that they are a lot more customer focused and ready to implement features that would make it easier for people to adopt. The other downside, however, of industry standard is, as Cory Doctorow has put it, is enshittification, which you will find that there are a lot of technologies that companies will adopt and then kind of get entrenched in. And then once the company realizes, hey, we have our stable pool of customers and there's not a lot of room for growth, they will make it more difficult to actually use and won't be putting in features that make it easier because it is so difficult for them to move off platform. Why would the company bother trying to make things better for them if they've already got, these people embedded and they're not going anywhere if they've already got. So you also have to, leverage that has the technology, is the technology so stable and used that it's not changing and not evolving and not improving itself. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's at least there's some thought to be put into that. You have to evaluate it as it comes by. There you go.
All right. So I'm going to transition to career advice. So what advice would you give to engineers who want to grow into leadership roles?
It's a very different skill. You can be a very good engineer and not be a good leader, which is you don't necessarily want everyone who is a good developer to wind up being a team lead, right? It's a different skill. There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of personality. You have to be able to deal with people who have different kinds of personality and be able to deal with people who have different levels of understanding of technology, which gets very frustrating. There's definitely times where I've seen senior developers get frustrated with junior developers or just generally less seasoned developers who don't understand how to build something. So that's number one is beyond just like, if you are an engineer, if you're a developer and you know your technology back and forth, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good team lead. However, there are definitely roles for you as you become a senior engineer. You can become an architect. You can, learn to sort of get the idea of how to build an application without actually touching a line of code, right? You have to just convey it in a way where you can understand. You just have to be prepared for the people who are not quite as senior as you to be able to understand the technical message that you're delivering and why you want to actually implement the technology that way. It's important to kind of get that idea across to them. The other thing is, as a senior, developer, as you become to that level, you also have to be able to accept that sometimes it is not only better to, accept a no when someone tells you, no, you can't build it that way, or no, you shouldn't do it that way. Even though, it deep in your heart, you're like, I know this is right. I know it's going to be great later, whatever. Sometimes accept the no, because what that'll give you a chance of is later you'll be able to say, I told you so. Hey, so that's a bonus. So what does it take to be a good leader is communication skills. The ability to be flexible and the ability to listen to people who are on your team that are giving you the, sometimes advice that's better than yours or a technology direction that's better than yours and hear them out. Even though if you're not going to go that direction for maybe not a technology reason, but for a business reason, you still should be able to listen to everyone on your team who has something to bring to the table on why you should or shouldn't build something in a certain way. I think that's a very important part of being a technical leader. Being a technical leader involves also seeing stuff from the 500-foot perspective. So you're not just looking at the individual piece of functionality that you're building right there, but you're looking at the whole platform, or you're looking at it not only from a technology perspective, but like I said, from a business perspective. Would a client want this? Why would a client care about this? How are we going to convince a client that it's worth it? And you also have to look, sometimes you build stuff that you don't necessarily think is a great idea because you look at it from a, it's something the client wants, and it might not necessarily be something that, you might look at it and think, hey, this is something that even though the client really wants this feature, it might not be something that they're actually ever going to use or any of their people are going to actually use. But if they really want it built, you have to sometimes bite the bullet and say, all right, we'll build that feature if that's really what you want to implement. You just have to weigh it against building other features that, might sell better or be a better application decision or a technology decision, right? You don't want to sacrifice the quality of the technology for a feature that might not necessarily get built. I used to call this the gray stuff and the shiny stuff, right? You always want to make sure that you balance the two. The shiny stuff is the stuff that sells, right? The new features on the product that are going to make things amazing. And then the gray stuff is the day-to-day stuff that you don't necessarily want to have to deal with, but you have to deal with. So things like to make the application more stable. So scalability, security, things like that are just the nuts and bolts of an application that, the stuff that winds up, a lot of times you'll see stuff winding up in your, your to-do list. So you'll have that, that time where you're going to have to just go through your code and kind of make all those updates at the end of every 7 sprints or so. You say, all right, I'm going to deal with all this this code clutter and everything that's kind of built up. That's the gray stuff. That's the stuff you don't necessarily want to have to deal with, but you have to balance that against the shiny stuff that you're building. The shiny stuff is what sells. The gray stuff is what actually keeps the application going and what makes the customers comfortable with the application and know that it's stable and know that it's actually secure, and you won't get a call at 3 a.m. that something's happening. So
I'm going to go off script here. So
yeah,
I'm going to touch on a couple things. So you mentioned COBOL, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you still have that in your tool bag. And then I was going to say, what would you say now with AI and programming, right? And let's, before I keep rounding off a bunch of questions, let's just start with that. AI and programming. It's a useful tool, right? But it's still good to learn programming. And right now, for somebody that wants to start programming, or they're trying to develop hard skills, as I call them, right? The LAMP stack, right? Your Linux, Apache, M server, MySQL, and then some kind of programming language like Python or PHP before that, right? So, and a lot of SOC analysts, right, they look at logs, and I wanted to see what skills you think are necessary to pick up in programming to start out, and then leveraging AI, using it as a tool.
So I will say, just with AI in general, I think AI is very useful. I think it is great for you to be able to go in and give a prompt to an AI and it will actually generate whatever application you use. I think it is still error prone, and I don't think it is 100% ready for prime time. I'd say, however, it's scarily 80% ready for prime time to actually build what's necessary very quickly and get you where you need to go. But you still kind of need, like I said, the logic behind it and the ability to look at what is being built and what has been output by the AI to actually then make sure it's actually doing what it needs to do properly. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So I think AI is a useful tool. but I think it's the same sort of thing as like, are you watching the new Pluribus show on Apple TV?
No.
Okay, it's a
But
brilliant show. It's really good.
I'll look it up.
That is the question everyone's asking now is, are you watching this show? It is a smart show about character development, and it's really just about characters, and a lot of it is also kind of what the characters are doing in this weird scenario of us effectively the human race has turned kind of into an AI. Not to give anything away.
Oh, okay.
And how these characters react to it. Now, I don't know if AI could ever create that, like, that sort of story, right? Like any TV show that Vince Gilligan is going to create, I don't think AI is going to create that. And I think the same can be said for code, right? So code that you're going to write, I think it'll come out with something that is close to what you need. But if you really want to make it work well and not have errors when you commit your code, I think you need to actually take the care to deep dive and be able to understand what the code did and function the way you want it to work, right? It's not 100% there. It's about 80% there. You still need a developer on some level to do that 20% of the work of the lift. You're not going to have an AI create an award-winning TV show the same way that you're not going to have an AI create the next greatest new application on the web. It'll come close. It'll give you building blocks, but I still don't think it's there to actually give you the full, nuts to bolts application. If I'm wrong, and if there are AIs out there that can actually do, full scale nuts to bolts, I'd love to see it, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
So that's that. As far as skills, look, like I said, I started with COBOL. I started in the early days with a DB2 as my database. I know SQL back and forth. I think that there is a lot to say about knowing database platforms and the ability to understand what makes queries move faster and slower. And I think that's a fundamental part of it. The next fundamental part of it is just the business layer and knowing, like you said, PHP, Python, C#, something in the middle that kind of connects everything and has the ability to handle the business logic. And then on top of it, you've got the front end logic. So I'm still a big believer in end-tier technology. And there are just an infinite number of tiers now, but it's still fundamentally everything on the internet and everything in development, everything from nuts to bolts. I always use this analogy, it can be turned into a toaster, right? Bread goes in, toast comes out. So when you take technology and what you're building, what you're doing is you have input into the toaster, that is your bread, and then you have output, that is your toast. You are building a toaster, all you got to do is heat up the bread. And you just need to break everything down that you're building into small enough functions so that you can, do all the little pieces that need to be done. So that's my nutshell right there is get to know as many different layers of the technology and the ability to handle it as possible. There is a huge difference between COBOL and a fully fledged functional language like I said, like I was working with C# and .NET, or even just old school C or anything, right? But ultimately, despite the differences in languages and how things are kind of cooked, it is still boils down to bread goes in, toast comes out. You put in an input, out comes an output. So that's the way you got to look at any project you're approaching: is what is the input, what is the output.
Okay. And then to touch on this, because people in tech, right, they're working on a task or they have a project to do. How do they equate that to quote unquote business value? As we hear a lot of times. Well, I guess this is me transitioning to, before we get to that, hiring, being a candidate and hiring, but business value. What value are you adding, right? Because a lot of times in tech, We just have tasks, we do them. Well, at least for me, I have a ticket, I work on the ticket. But would you call it revenue enablers, or how are you helping? How are you creating business value?
Right. It's the shiny stuff. So what sells? You need to know what you can have it two ways. Either you know what your customers are looking for and you build what they actually want, or you don't know what they're looking for, but you think that there's a market for what you want to build and that people would actually want to use the technology that you're building. And then you take a stab in the dark. The second one is obviously more risky. The first one is you're building to a specific client requirement and a client need. You have to look for opportunities where you can find them. I have found oftentimes that kind of guessing what the clients want instead of actually hearing what the clients have to say and kind of taking their input and then evaluating their input overall. I think kind of guessing sometimes will lead you to building stuff that doesn't get used. I'll also say the other side of it is there will be times that clients will recommend, hey, I really want this feature, like I said, and you'll build it. And then, deep down, you're like, no one's going to use this thing. No one's going to use it. But you still build it, and then people don't use it. So you just, when it comes in. You also sometimes will be surprised when, you build something and it takes off, right? So that original product that we had built at TMP prior to it being called Radency, we had built this that career site product, and they had at the time had built a dozen products, and that was the one that took off. We didn't think it was going to take off. We didn't think it was going to take off as quickly as it did. We didn't have time to make it as scalable. That was all of a sudden that was like, oh my God, we have to focus on scalability. It was you never know what's actually going to work, but building something wrong, like I said, is better than it's always worth building something wrong if it's worth building right at all.
And we're talking about monster.com, right?
So at the time, that was our solution was separate from Monster. Monster was what TMP did was they bought a bunch of internet companies. They didn't know what was going to work. They knew stuff had to be in the HR technology world. So they bought a bunch of things. Monster was the one that kind of took off. But TMP was basically, there was a point that Monster got so big, it became the main company and then spun off TMP. And we kind of picked up all the little pieces that Monster had spun off around the world, and then formed a new company based off that. And it now became known as Radency.
Now, before we transition, that got me curious about what clients wanted on their career site, because, we have LinkedIn here, we have Indeed, we have Career Builder still, Glassdoor, Monster still out there, Dice. What makes them different? And then I don't know, did you build, or is that part of, because we hear this a lot, the applicant tracking system, right? The ATS system. Get your resume in front of through the ATS system. Can you speak on that? What you know about it?
I can speak about ATS systems from a career perspective. It is, I will say, so for my part of the company, I think we had at the end, we had made some, the company made some acquisitions, and we had picked up at least one ATS, at least in Europe, I think. But generally speaking, our role in the company, where we were positioned in the market, was we would bring candidates to your ATS. We didn't necessarily want to be the ATS. We didn't want to get into the nitty gritty of the hiring in the company and the transitioning them onto their actual role and all that, which is a lot of what the ATS does. Workday does a great job of actually the HR platform inside the company. Our role was the career site, which brought people to the ATS, right? So we would take a feed of jobs that were in the ATS. We would put our search technology on top of it to allow candidates to search for jobs. We would put our CRM technology on top of it as well, which would allow candidates to get into their system and allow recruiters at the company to find candidates that match jobs in their system. But the career site itself was, how do we bring candidates to the ATS? How do we get them to apply? So a job search was a very big part of that. Another part of it was the internal job search. So for internal candidates, it was, how do we get people to who are at a company who are trying to find a job or to get a new position, searching for jobs internally. That was another feature that we had as part of our career sites. That was actually a lot of the overlap with platform, because at platform I dealt with identity, internal users logging in over SSO. That was my jam. That was my wheelhouse. So how we interact with things like LinkedIn and Indeed and Dice and all these other companies that are out there. Those are very general job boards. And even though a company will have its own specific profile, it was very rare that the company's LinkedIn would be their main feature of their website. They would want something that was branded to their company branding and that lived on their domain. That's why you go to a site like, careers.companyx.com. When you're looking at what jobs that company has, you'll be on their website, and then you'll look at their actual specific career site. That's what we were building, was that piece of it.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Yep.
I'm going to transition us into the hiring manager perspective and the candidate experience. So, bonus. So now you are the hiring manager. Let's start with, how much importance is the resume to you? And then the second part would be getting them to the interview. What do you like in the interview, in person, on site?
Yeah, so I will say before the interview, right? So the resume is really the only chance I have. The way it worked for me was there was a separate recruiter at the company who would go through and find candidates for me, and they would bring candidates to my attention. I would look at what they have to offer and look at the resumes, and then based on their resumes, I would decide, this person is great, this person isn't. Sometimes I would go back to the recruiter and say, hey, does this person have this skill or that skill? My number one thing that I was looking for is, the recruiter would do the pre-interview, and they would know how good of a communicator they are and have a general sense of how good they are with the technology. And I think both of those things were important on a team. Was the person actually a good fit for what we were looking for? Did they seem amicable and friendly and easy to work with, or were they just off the bat difficult and miserable? And you want to eliminate those people, because you don't want that, right? If they're coming in for an interview and they're just off the bat kind of grumpy and not really good at being friendly, and that's kind of a red flag. You don't necessarily want that on your team. But you do want people who come in with good ideas, and you do want people who can communicate well, and that's a bonus. So you ask your recruiter if they have that. From the resume itself, you're looking for a skills match 90% of the time. When someone comes in to talk to you, it's the same thing. Is, are they amicable, and do they have the ability to talk about the technology that you're working in, right? Is the technology a good fit? Do they seem to have a good knowledge of how to do what you do, right? Then you can give them a technology test if you really want to find out, are they able to actually, build something in the languages that you need them to build something in. But more important than actually doing the technology and the programming, well, that's fine and something you can test for. I just want to make sure that they can work well with a team, that they are actually someone who I would want to see on a daily basis in an office. This was back when we were going into offices.
Yeah.
So now, however, I'm on the other side of the fence. I am the candidate. I have had a lot of success in getting first interviews. I've even done a fair number of second interviews. I seem to have an issue for some reason with with actually landing the job. So getting the second interview has been great. I think it's great that I'm presenting what I have It is incredibly frustrating. Just for volume's sake, the amount of applying to jobs that I've been doing, customizing a resume and cover letter as needed to whatever specific job. I've been at this for 25 years at my last company. I have a lot of skills. Some of them are soft skills that, like I said, communication. It's difficult to kind of nail that down and convey that in a resume. But
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. A resume, if I may interrupt, is I feel like there's so much importance on the resume that for me, I'm like, why don't you take a little extra time, look at their LinkedIn profile, look at what groups they're part of, and instead of we only have 5 seconds to look at the resume. But sorry for interrupting.
No. By all means, interrupt. So here's the thing, and we had talked about this forever, right? Video resumes would be great. I don't know if that would actually ever fly as a thing, but I think that where I see a lot of things going now is short form content, right? A lot of people are posting on LinkedIn short form video content, but I don't see it necessarily. I don't know if there are a lot of candidates doing it. I don't know if there are a lot of recruiters who would say, oh yeah, that was a cool, interesting little short form video that this guy had about, his technology skills. And I don't know if that's something that a recruiter would then present to a hiring manager and things like that. And I think that's an interesting case. I kind of wish that there was more of the social media. The social media market has pivoted to video content, and I think that it's good that it did. I don't see it kind of catching on in the recruitment world, and it's a shame because I think it would help a lot if it kind of did, right? If LinkedIn could recommend candidates and be like, here, check out this video that this person posted. Wouldn't that be interesting for your team? Things like that. But I just don't see that kind of transitioning there. What I've found as a candidate, now, and what I'm seeing a lot with the ATSs and things like that. And like I said, I've been at this since 1996. In the days of yore, there was a lot of people who had these skills would come in and find the jobs that they needed because there were recruiters searching for them, right? I don't see a lot of the functionality now is not so much from a recruiter's perspective. They are not searching for candidates. They are filtering candidates, right? And I think that's a detriment to recruiters and to people who are looking to hire. Getting back on the Cory Doctorow initiatification, the longer jobs are posted and kind of live around on these job boards, I think the more LinkedIn gets, right? Because they have a job post and they can charge them for that job post. I don't see it as like the incentive of like, I don't think it's optimized for the candidate to actually get the job. The irony of something as simple as LinkedIn Easy Apply. Yes, it's super easy to apply to these jobs, but the irony is that the unintended consequences now that these jobs are super easy to apply to, they get flooded with not just real candidates who actually could potentially do the job, but AI fake slop that gets tossed in there. And the other side too, jobs. There was a company the other day that listed like 600 jobs out of the blue that were clearly just copied from another company. They just literally just cut and paste these same jobs over to their company. And it was like, what is the end game other than to clog up LinkedIn with jobs that aren't going to actually go anywhere? I've been on a few. I've had more than two, maybe three, but companies that would schedule me for an interview. Then I was like, this is a scam company. It sucks, but it does happen these days, and I don't think it used to be as prevalent to have that happen. I think the technology has made things better, but I also think it's made things worse. And how do we fix that? I don't know. It's hard to kind of get there.
I was gonna say, with your background and identity, I was gonna say I would advocate LinkedIn have to have, I don't know, maybe they should have to verify every person that's on LinkedIn, right? If you want to have a LinkedIn profile, and then as a company, There's got to be some kind of verification where they can get you on. Well, I don't want to, because that would affect me and my little company page. But there's got to be some kind of verification that they know that you're a real person. You're actually showing your face.
Like a blue check mark kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like how do we actually prove that this person is a legitimate person?
Because I often see that, like, one of them is called Jobber or something like that, or those different career sites that I see listing other jobs when clearly the job's not posted. And then I was going to talk about more on the candidate experience. I often, well, this is two-parter, I guess. You as a hiring manager, and then how do you see it as a candidate? Because this is my question. I wonder, so when they post a job, right, a hiring manager, let's not go with the recruiter because that's a different part of it, I think. But the hiring manager put out a job description, right? The person left for whatever reason, right? Are they looking to fill somebody to take a lateral move that's already there, or somebody to grow, or maybe they should list that in the job description? Because I always wondered, and this is a statement that I'm going to say. I feel like it's funny that companies want you to be loyal to them, right? But then they want to poach you from another company if
Yeah.
you're making a lateral move. So I guess I go.
In other words,
I think there was a question in there, and I may have.
Why are companies not hiring unemployed people? Why are they going after the people who already have jobs?
Okay, there you
right?
go.
I think there's a lot of that happens. I don't know. When I first got let go and I started looking for jobs, I didn't have it up on my LinkedIn profile or on my resume. It still said that I am, up till present was my job. So I didn't actually have it listed that it was up until July 2025. And I had that going through September. I was getting a lot more interviews. And then when I kind of changed it over to, until July 2025, there were a lot less people who were kind of picking me up for interviews. And I don't know why that is. For me, it makes no sense. When I was a hiring manager, I would take whoever I thought could actually fill the role. It didn't matter whether they were actually currently employed or looking or whatever, or unemployed. Like, it didn't make a difference to me. It was, did they have the skills? Did they have the amicability? Did they actually feel like they belong on a team? And did they feel like they belong in the company? You don't necessarily get that from a resume. You get that from an interview, but it's pretty quick to kind of to get that. You know what I mean? I don't know why it is that so many companies are looking to poach people. I can also say from a corporate world, I saw that all the time. Like, there were companies that were looking to, you see it on the C-suite level of, like, this person came from this company and they are a technology leader and they left Google and now work at Apple or Facebook or whatever, like that. And those are people who are on, like, this very high, like, VP or SVP level and the C-suite level, and you see them moving from company to company. It's a different world at that level, I'd say. But for if I'm hiring someone as like an engineer or a security manager or something like that, I just need to know, or an IT person or DevOps person, I just need to know that they have the skills and ability to manage what they need to do. If they can impress me with what they know and how they would handle situations on the interview, I would absolutely give them a shot if they were the right fit for the team.
Okay. And then maybe personal here, but are you still looking for VP roles, or are you changing gears, maybe shifting into another job, considering it?
In the immortal words of Winston Zedmore from Ghostbusters, if there's a steady paycheck involved, I'll believe whatever you tell me. Okay. I would happily do a VP role again, but I would also happily. I'm focusing now on sales engineering. I actually wouldn't mind doing. I took a test the other day for cybersecurity leadership. Wouldn't mind doing a leadership role in cybersecurity. I'm not certified in anything. I think one of the detriments of being at my job for so long was that I kind of. It's not so much that I didn't keep up on the newest trends in technology. I did. I really did keep my ear to the ground, and especially in the security world, towards the end when I was on the GRC team, I was definitely keeping up to date on the latest in security trends and how things were, what exploits there were, and how to defend against them, and how to kind of prepare your systems to kind of handle that sort of stuff, both from a development perspective and from an engineering perspective, from an IT perspective, right, a DevOps perspective. I had my ear to the ground on all of that. So I've already forgotten what the question was that you asked, but yeah, I think that the trouble I'm having is I was a jack of all trades, master of none, which I think is actually a good thing to have, but I think it's difficult to kind of search for a job when you don't have a specific job title that you can say, this is going to be me, and this is exactly what I'm going to be perfect for. And you also have a security certification, CSSP or something like that, or I know my way around Okta, I know my way around Ping Federate, and I know my way around Azure, but I am certified in none of them. And I don't know if that's, I think that going up against other candidates who are certified in these things kind of puts me at a bit of a disadvantage, or going up against someone like I had an interview the other day that I heard the job, I heard from the recruiter, I knew 100% well that I would be great at this job. And they ironically, 2 hours after meeting with the recruiter, they turned me down, and I followed up with the recruiter. I was like, why? And they were like, well, we felt you didn't have enough SQL experience. And I was like, just for future sake, ask me, because I can code SQL like in circles around most people, and if you need that, I can do it. I would get lost sometimes doing SQL queries into the logs, or and finding out why there would be some issue with SSO logins, and pulling out queries that would actually result in reports that would give us a advanced warning when there was going to be or some sort of issue happening down the line. I can definitely code the SQL around it, but because that version of my resume, which I was handing out, didn't specifically say that I could do that.
Yeah.
Lost out on that job. And it sucks because I probably could have done a pretty good job at them, and they missed out on me. So hopefully they'll find someone that fits their bill. I don't know if and then the other question is, can I reapply? How long before I can say, hey, listen, you passed up on me, but I really think this is a good job for you, and it's still open 3 months later. What do you say?
I can relate to the not being on your resume. As an IT support guy, I can go back to IT support, right? That's why I have that on there. I'm trying to get into cybersecurity, and going back to, I missed out on a job because on my resume, it didn't have Windows 10 deployment experience, that I hadn't done it. And I had to refresh so many computers on Windows 10 just using Microsoft Intune, etc., or just using the USB, plugging it in. And not everybody uses Windows Pixie Boot, right? But because I didn't have that quote unquote experience, they wanted somebody that had Windows 10 to 11. And I said, I've done Windows 7 to 10. I'm pretty sure I can do it. But that was the recruiter, and then hiring managers want what they want, but I guess that would be more of a wish from a candidate experience. Recruiters push back on hiring managers for these, what I call, or everybody calls, right, unicorn. But sometimes I think they're just, because there's so many jobs that I've done, right? You can look at my LinkedIn profile. They have all these job descriptions, not that I have listed there, but when I applied, right, the job description. There's so many things I didn't even touch or do that they were asking for when I got the job. So many job descriptions are, in my opinion, just wish lists, right? And they should just keep it specific, keep it simple, right? Just keep it simple. That would be a wish from a candidate. And then maybe close your job board to, no more than 500, right? Or I don't whatever lever you have to push, right, from the candidate experience. But those are some wish lists. And then on interviews, I'm going to touch on this a little bit, because I think first impressions are that's all they are, first impressions. You really don't know Somebody can be great in an interview, but just
Right.
bad at the job.
Yeah. Well, that happened to me not too long ago. So there was a guy. I was telling someone who I knew from the dog park. Took my poodle to the dog park, and I was telling him about what I did with identity management and how I was looking for a job. And a couple of weeks later, some other guy who worked at an identity management company, that did this sort of stuff, was there talking to the same guy, and he's like, "Oh, have you met this Larry guy?" Turns out I had applied to a job at that company that this guy, he wasn't actually the hiring manager, but he was like one team over from that hiring manager. And that hiring manager had just hired that another guy who was on that interview. It wasn't me. He hired someone else. And the guy who was at the dog park was like, "Yeah, that guy's not cutting it. He's not doing a great job." And he just, he started like a couple weeks ago. He's not really doing that great. And I just kind of wish that, like, if some serendipity had happened, that I had met not necessarily the dog park guy, but the guy who worked with him, and it all worked out that I had gotten that job instead. Who knows? It could be a completely different world right now, and I wouldn't have wound up still looking for a job, and they would have wound up with a better fit for their company. So, but yes, that said, networking is also a big part of the job hunt, right? As much as I love to say it is 100% going in and finding a job that you match for, a lot of it is also talking to the right people, because you never know when you talk to someone who might actually say, "You know what, let's give this guy a shot in this role." Reach out to every contact you've got. And I think what you're doing, the fact that like I said, we met when you driving me to Staples in California when I happened to be there. And had that not kind of happened, this interview wouldn't have happened. Right. So this video wouldn't have happened. And who knows what other sorts of things that might lead to. There might be then someone who watches this and says, "You know what? I like that Larry guy's beard. Let me go and see how he does on this technology stuff."
Yeah, that would be great. And if I can say, I'm doing this to help other job seekers get some information from experts sharing their wisdom, and then I'm doing it selfishly, I guess, to get myself out there, right? Because they say you need to get views on your LinkedIn, right? You need to get people. You need to get recruiters to look at your eyes. So that's kind of what I'm doing here too. So I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to continue to get guest speakers. I'm going to continue to do that. And now this is a passion of mine. And thank you, Larry. Do you have any final words
No,
for
just
job seekers or any words of wisdom?
Good luck out there. It's hard. I have lots of words of wisdom, but for this particular moment, keep at it. Keep applying to every job that you can find that comes close to what you're looking for, and keep making contacts everywhere you can, because you never know what might actually work out.
Okay. I'm going to stop the recording here, folks. You'll find links to Larry. You can support him, and let's get him hired, and let's get me hired, right?
All right.
Stop the recording here. Oh, hold on one second.